and get out of my sweats.
I have a question to ask you. Have you been keeping track all the properties that we rezone? Have you been keeping track of how many acres they are? The one on Ritter Drive is a little over 5 acres, right?
What was that?
The one on Ritter Drive is over 5 acres, right?
Yeah, it's over 5, I think. Mike would know for sure.
And then the one on 4400 that we put those in, how many acres was that?
On Panunzio's?
Yeah.
I would have to look at that.
You know, they're moving right along. They've got a lot of projects in there going. They're going to be having homes in there real soon.
Oh, yeah, they are. I talked to Hugh today.
Do we know how many homes are going to be in there?
16, does that sound right, Mike?
16, okay.
16. And Hugh's doing some, and then a different builder's doing some.
Oh, okay.
So we might have a mix of patio homes and like multi-level, 2-story.
And the old mill, how many homes are going to go in there?
11.
11. That was way fast.
I'm striking gold tonight. Let's see. Yeah, 11, and they've got 1, 2, 3 are up and really going, and then one's got the trusses up. There's still some lots not sold in there.
But the ones that started have already been sold, right?
Yes, yep. They're all pre-sold.
Which makes it kind of nice, and that means we don't have any vacant homes just sitting empty, huh?
Right.
Okay. Thank you for your input.
Anything for you.
Oh, thank you.
I think we can get started. Rob Wingfield, just so you know, has been asked to be excused from this meeting. He did call me later in the evening or afternoon, so heads up there.
Okay, we have a quorum.
I can always give Rick a call as well if you'd like me to.
Kent, can you hear us? Kent, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Yeah. I had to step away for a second, sorry.
No worries. Suzette, can you hear us?
Yes, I sure can.
Perfect. Okay. Like to welcome everybody to our Tuesday, March 9th, 2021 Planning Commission work session. Would like to note that all the Planning Commission members are here with the exception of Commissioner Wingfield and I think, is he the only one we're missing?
Herman.
And Commissioner Herman. Thanks, Blair. With that, we'll go ahead and get started. Do we have any public comments, Shaylee?
So there's nobody down here, and I haven't received any emails or no comments on the YouTube either.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Mr. Agate, do you want to do presentations and reports?
Yeah, sorry about that. I was trying to text Rick. Hopefully we can get one.
No worries. I'll try.
as far as presentations and reports noted, the Harbor Freight Tools is coming along. They are hoping to have a soft opening by the end of the month for their location. Five Below is almost done. We have a new staffing services store or site called Nexio, which went in over by Milan Laser Hair Removal. Hazer, I can't speak. Over by Cosmoprof and the Carl's Jr. It's in that center. So they're open for business, or will be shortly, I guess. We have obviously the Dutch Brothers site going to City Council at the next meeting, their next meeting next week. And that project will move pretty quickly, whereas the building official has reviewed their plans already and things look pretty good from that perspective. As far as any other projects, there's some ideas in the property north of Lowe's that have been just conceptually discussed. Nothing I can really talk about too much, but some housing concepts there being looked at. And then obviously we have a rezone request this evening. Just trying to think if there's any other new businesses that I haven't noted. That should be it that I can recall. If I recall anything I missed that's pretty major to share with the public and Planning Commission, I'll let you know in the main meeting. But that's pretty much what's going on right now. So I'll leave it at that for the time being.
Thank you, Mr. Agate.
Hey, can I ask one question? Mike, what do you know about the mall?
Oh, yeah.
Same thing you all know, that it's defaulted, I guess be the right way to say it, and that it's up for auction. Beyond that, I don't know. Will it have impacts to us? Possibly. I mean, we do have stores right next to it where Ross and Staples are, so it's hard to say. But it's not a good thing. Usually when this kind of stuff happens, you'll see some kind of a revision of the site, gentrification of uses a lot of times. So it'd be interesting to see what property owners shake out in owning it and what Ogden City will ultimately allow to happen to it, should there be other ideas for it. So that's all I would say. I haven't heard anything though definitively, so I don't know.
Anything else? Anybody got any other questions? Okay. Our action items: 1A, discussion regarding proposed rezone request for property located at approximately 671 West, 4400 South, Riverdale, Utah. Mr. Agate?
Thank you. The applicant this evening is H&H 39th Street LLC. They looks like have joined us with Mr. Steiner and Mr. Hatch on this call. This is the work session, of course, so won't go too much into detail at this point, but we'll discuss this a little further at the main meeting. The main reason for tonight's meeting is to set the public hearing or to consider setting the public hearing. That's the action this evening. And what you need to look at is as in cases in the past with rezone requests, it's a check of the application to make sure everything is in line with what we would typically expect for the application, as far as, you know, fees being paid, property use, etc. They've provided the application. It's 4.62 acres of land. It's currently RMH1, which is a mobile home park zoning, and the request is for R4 multifamily. You'll see they paid their required payment for that request, and they've submitted the supporting reasoning for this request that she has been provided. The legal description has been provided. The map indicating the area being requested for rezone has been provided. And then you can see the last page has a brief response to those items A through D in response. So really there's not a whole lot more to say at this point other than you know, if there's any basic questions relative to the application submittal, clearly we can discuss that at the main meeting. But if you see anything about the application as far as the work session or any items of concern, at this point I'd be glad to answer anything you have and go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Agate. Any discussions, questions? I have a question for you, Mike. So it's 4 acres where that's 4 acres?
The application shows it as 4.62. So
Wow.
Pushing 5 acres.
I didn't realize that spot right there was that big. Okay. And then our other action item is consideration to set public hearing for proposed rezone request from mobile home park to recreational vehicle park, RMH1 zoning to multiple family residential, R4 zoning for properties located at approximately 671 West, 4400 South, Riverdale, Utah, 84405, as requested by H&H 39th Street LLC. Mr. Agate?
So it's pretty much what I just said. We usually bring them forward as discussion if there's any brief discussion items for the applicants as part A of the action items on tonight's agenda, and then obviously part B is the formal planning commission action item wherein you would consider setting that public hearing. The next available public hearing date would be March 23rd. So that's something you might want to just know if someone wants to make that action at a later point. But yeah, March 23rd at 6:30 would be when the next available time would be to set a public hearing. And clearly we'll have to fulfill all public hearing requirements. When I say we, myself and Shaylee, and getting that completed, we'll also need to put a sign or signs on the property indicating the request will be active, and get the notice out in the newspaper, website, all those good things. So really that's what this entails at this point. Again, it's just secondary component to the first item that I just talked about. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Agate. Anybody got anything else? Any discretionary items?
I did have a small training item, and it's just very brief. I figured we'd have a little bit of time, and it's about the general plan. It's hopefully you got your. I sent out training module 1 to all of you. Maybe it was a week and a half ago now. But anyway, some of you have already seen that. If you have, you can just disregard and say, thanks again, Mike. But those of you that haven't, hopefully it'll be a good read and you'll take some time and look through it, and it'll help you in your role. I want to just share quickly an item from the second module of that. And I actually may even share my screen. But in order to do that, I need to do something so I can see you. There we go.
Hey, Mike, while you're doing that, let me ask you a question real quick.
Sure.
You kind of helped me on this issue a couple weeks ago on that water shares. So everybody that builds a home now has to buy at least one share of water or close to it, right?
It's based upon irrigable acreage on the property. Any new subdivision or any new development project would be required to bring water shares to the city now as part of their new development project. Yeah, and that was, when did that get passed? I think it was 2019 is when we passed that, maybe mid-year 2019. But yeah,
how a share of water, one water share costs or anything?
I don't know. The public works director probably has a better feel than I do on that. Yeah, but I think I'm trying to remember. There's something about like 0.91 ERUs per irrigable acre or something that has to be brought to the table, something like that. Anyway, yeah, 0.91 ERUs per irrigable acre I think is our standard, and that's for all commercial and residential new developments or new subdivisions in the city post 2000.
When these guys do these developments, like the Peninsula one, do they leave those to the individual lots to buy theirs, or do they buy the whole, enough shares to cover their whole development
Yes.
prior to developing?
They're required. So when Peninsula and Old Mill went in, they had to provide water shares for those project areas, the whole entire area. So the residents won't be on the hook. The reason the one resident you're asking about did is because they did their own subdivision. So they're responsible for the irrigation or the water shares for their subdivision.
So whenever we do, we don't need to worry about the water shares. That'll already be something that's already
That's something. Yeah, that's something. That's something that's on my list. And so even on Dutch Brothers, you may remember I noted that they need to bring water shares as one of the outstanding punch list items. And that's something the Public Works Director usually will hit as well. So that is one of those items that we will require them to show they have provided to Public Works before we will issue their building permit on their project. It's one of the checklist items now.
Okay, but it won't be. We need to be concerned with on approving their preliminary site plans and all that.
No, because usually the Public Works Director will either have that resolved by or before it goes to City Council, or a work arrangement out with them wherein there will be no building permit issued until they provide it. So it works itself out. But I will bring it up as an outstanding item that needs to be cured to the Planning Commission as far as representing that there's an issue, so the applicants know that that is a requirement.
All right, thanks.
Yep, yeah, you're welcome. So the only thing I wanted to just briefly note is, since we were talking about general plan and rezones more frequently, in this module under the planning process and the general plan, I'm just going to read a little bit of it. And I may share my screen, or I don't know, we'll see. What I want to read is it talks about the planning process. It says the two components of the planning process. Many people believe that community planning implies producing a plan, such as the design of a building or a subdivision. The use of the term planning, however, reveals that planning is much more than a static plan portrayed on a colored map. Planning may be more clearly perceived as an ongoing community process that consists of two major components, depicted graphically on the following page. And I'll share it. Why not? So you can see here, they got the general plan, which is goals and policies adopted by the legislative body, and then plan implementation, which is the zoning ordinance, subdivision ordinance, growth management program, etc. So when we look at rezones and zoning ordinance, the general plan becomes the guiding document that helps us to make our decisions. And it can be more than just the master land use element of the general plan. The general plan wording can also help us guide the decisions. And the reason that matters is, just because the master land use plan document says something, the wording may provide a different element to that. And you'll see that more and more. I'm going to try to be better. Well, I'm planning to be better going forward. And when we have rezones, I'm making sure I find where the right general plan language is, so you have that at your discretion as you make decisions relative to rezone requests. But as you can see further down, it says with acceptance and adoption by the legislative body, the process moves from the first component, the plan, to the second, plan implementation. The transition from vision and goals to functional public policy. Now I do know we're at a point, I'm going to stop sharing this. I do know we're at a point where it's been a couple of years and the general plan hasn't been updated. So I'm going to work with the city administrator to start up a general plan update, because I think that Riverdale is in a position where we're shifting from maybe where we were over the last 8 or 9 years since the last revision. So that is something that we're going to work on. But I just want to keep reading a little bit more from this. It says the plan embodies the community goals and becomes a guide to public decision making. Following adoption of the plan, the community employs the tools available to implement the plan. A plan, regardless of the time, thought, vision, or expense to produce it, is of no value if it is not put into action or plugged into the decision-making process by implementation programs. It can also be said that a magnificent set of land use regulations and programs set in motion with no guiding vision of the future A plan can lead only to public decisions that add up to no focused, comprehensible, or desired results. Let's make it clear up front, the plan is not a land use ordinance and the land use ordinance is not a plan. They're not one and the same. Understanding the distinction between the two is extremely important. And I like this statement here. While many communities have developed without the sense of direction provided by a general plan and a sensible planning process, such a practice can be likened to building a home without a blueprint. All we know it can be done, but we are not sure we would like to live there. So with that, there's a really interesting quote here, and I'll wrap this up. Just something to think about. And it's a fascinating quote that really cuts to the heart of what we're trying to do. The header is, how shall we plan our communities? And this is the quote. If we are now to reinvest in America, consideration should be given to what kind of America we want to create. Our investments in transit must be supported by land use patterns which put riders and jobs within an easy walk of stations. Our investments in affordable housing should place families in neighborhoods where they can save dollars by using their autos less. Our investments in open space should reinforce regional green belts and urban limit lines. Our investments in highways should not unwittingly support sprawl, intercity disinvestment, or random job decentralization. Our investments in inner cities and urban businesses ought to be linked by transit to the larger region, not isolated by gridlock. Our planning and zoning codes should help create communities, not sprawl. And the quote is from Peter Calthorpe, who wrote The Next American Metropolis. So anyway, just kind of a food for thought opportunity where we're looking at a rezone in a general plan. You know, you want the general plan to reflect you and your reflection of the community. So does the general plan, does how we do zoning, does how we do development reflect Riverdale City and its residents? And that's something to take seriously and think about as we look at these. And the reason I do bring it up too, you will see potentially additional rezones coming in the near future. I've already talked to a couple of our property owners that are looking at some options. So anyway, that's just something to think about. With that's all I have. So thanks for giving me your time and listening. Yeah, I don't know if any of you have any other questions, but otherwise that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Agate. It's always good. Thank you for always keeping us up to date and covering us. Does anybody have anything else?
I just got a quick chat from Shaylee. She did a quick look up. She says that she looked up 6 acre feet of water, Blair, and the shares are going for $20,000 to $25,000 for the 6 acre feet water share. Yeah.
Water is gold.
Is that culinary or is that secondary?
Do you know, Shaylee? It probably is just water rights. I don't know if it specifies with. I don't know how water rights work.
One person I talked to about that said that for like irrigation type water, for I think one share of water, it was like it was actually Christina, and she said she found one for like 22,000, but that was for a secondary water, for like a field type irrigation. So I was just curious what culinary runs, and I tried to look it up on the Weber Basin, and I have no clue on that site.
So it's showing me irrigation. Let's see. So I'm guessing secondary because that's what it shows on the one that I looked at. But I'll keep looking, and if I find something more definitive, I'll let you know.
Okay, it's not real important, but I just was curious. And then if anybody's ever talking to me about doing a development, I would probably bring that to their attention just so they're aware of it too.
And that lines about up because 1 acre feet, if I remember what Sean has said in the past, is about $3,000 to $3,500, which matches these numbers that Shaylee has provided. So
Yeah, water is very, very expensive. Anything else? Okay, 6:23. Be back 6:29. Okay, thanks, you guys. Do we have everybody coming back? Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to our Tuesday, March 9th, 2021 Planning Commission meeting. I would like to welcome everyone here and note that all planning commissioners are here with the exception, why does my brain do this? With the exception of Chair
Commissioner
Wingfield. Commissioner Wingfield, sorry. Do we have any public comment, Shaylee?
So no, I haven't gotten anything since work session. And then, so Rick Herman is here, Commissioner Herman?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I just
Yes,
had
he
him.
joined. Shaylee, he joined us about midway through the work session.
Okay,
Maybe
perfect.
more at the front of the work session.
Okay, good deal. I wish it would notify me on my side because I can't see that.
Sorry about that.
No, you're
Yeah,
fine. I just want to make sure I have the record right. So
I
thank
think
you.
I think he showed up at about, I'd say 6:10 or so.
I think so.
Good deal. Thank you.
I'll try to watch for you as well. With no public comment, go into presentations and reports from Mr. Agate.
Thank you. As noted, I noted Harbor Freight getting close to a soft opening the end of the month. Five Below opening hopefully the end of the month. Business Nexio Staffing Services opening up next to Malone Laser Hair and over by Carl's Jr. Noted that there's some discussions about some of the R4 properties by Lowe's that I've had, just conceptually nothing happening at this point there. And then the Rezone this evening, I also noted that Dutch Brothers Coffee will be going to the City Council next week for their review with the City Council, as will be the AWA subdivision that's part of that. And that Dutch Brothers is anxious to get going as soon as they can. I did fail to note, but will note Cafe Rio across the street has had their building permit issued, and you'll start to see some movement there as well. So that's all happening. And then I'm trying to think if there's anything else. That's everything. That's everything I can think of at this point. That otherwise you don't know, I think. So yeah, I'll defer to if you have any questions.
With Cafe Rio, is Raising Cane's also got a building permit?
They don't yet. No, they're a little bit further behind. Raising Cane's and Mobet's building. Cafe Rio was in a challenge with the lease that they were working through, and so they're pretty anxious to get going so they can get in their building. But the others are forthcoming. There's some also RDA discussions that need to happen relative to some of the funding mechanisms of that project area that still need to be worked through. So that's a little bit of the reason that slowed down a little bit, but it's still moving forward. We're just working through some numbers through the RDA.
Thank you, Mr. Agate. I have a question. Is Cafe Rio going to keep where they're at or move down to where they're building?
That's a relocation. That's the lease challenge that they have. They don't really want to miss a beat with being in business. They will miss maybe. I think my understanding is the fear is they may miss a couple weeks, but they don't want it to be such a long duration that it damages their momentum. So it's a relocation.
Okay, thank you. Consent items, consideration of meeting minutes from February 23rd, 2021 work session and regular meeting. I'm sorry that I skipped that in our work session. Anybody have anything? Motion to approve.
Make a motion that we approve the consent items.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, perfect. Moving on to our action item 1, discussion regarding proposed rezone request for property located at approximately 671 West, 4400 South, Riverdale, Utah. Mr. Eggett?
Thank you. Yeah, this is an opportunity to look over the rezone request. The applicant team is here with Mr. Steiner and Mr. Hatch, who are available if you have any questions at this point. We do need to be careful kind of questions we ask relative to the actual rezone, where that would be more appropriate in a public hearing with the public present and that sort of thing. However, if you have some basic questions, that's why we have on the discussion item to maybe introduce or understand the rezone request from the applicant side of it. And then obviously to look at the application in full that's been provided, we have it all filled out. We have the fee being paid, and they have answered items A through D, as well as provided the property plat map and the legal description. So they've fulfilled that requirement, and that's in your packet. So I would defer to you as planning commissioners if you have any questions relative to this request from me or the applicant team at this time. Thank you.
I have a question. On the map, on the far side, it tells us it's the Graft, Lindsley, and subdivision. The next line down, I'm having a problem understanding that because it says Salt Lake Base and Meridian. Now, is that really the information for this piece of property? Is that a Salt Lake Base?
That's just a survey. That's a survey standard that they're going off of. That's how the survey standards in the state are set up. This is actually just the plat from the subdivision. So that has no validity other than they're just showing you. This is a previously approved plat. It was approved, I think, back in 2019. It looks like early 2019. So, but this is the plat drawing showing you it. But it's the property that's in red. That's what really matters. It's just showing you the location.
Then the next question I have, is this in the flood zone? Because it's right next to the river. Does it have the flood zone there?
It's not showing on here, but yes, there is a portion of it. I have to remember, I'm looking at my flood map right now. I would say the back maybe 40%, the back 30% of it has floodplain impact area that would be required to have insurance and develop to floodplain standards if a building was built there. So yes, probably 30% of it's impacted by what's called a flood zone A or AE.
Okay. So do we need to consider that when we, I mean, I'm excited that we're going to do something with that piece of
That has
property.
no bearings at this point in the process. That's more of something you would look at as part of a development site plan.
Okay, that's what I need to know. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have one question. I'm assuming there's still people in trailers in some of that area. Will they be out of there before the rezone gets approved, and what effect will that have on the rezone if the trailers are still there and the people are still living there? Do you know the plan on that?
I mean, personally, the residents with a rezone, I think it's a fair question. I don't know that there's any reason they couldn't continue to live there, but I think under certain state laws, they have a timing threshold or an allowance to be relocated and allowed to help be relocated. There's so many months that have to be cleared. So even if there was a rezone that was approved, there would still be a timing mechanism that they would be allowed. And maybe Mr. Steiner and Mr. Hatch can talk to that a little bit more, but that's my understanding of what would happen.
Won't be in violation of anything if that does happen, though.
With it going to an R4, it's an interesting question. I want to say I don't think so, Blair, but I'll have to look more closely at the RMH1 zone and see if it being changed to an R4 does anything that's detrimental to the existing use. I haven't thought about that. That being said, I still think they would have the state code protections that would override that zoning mechanism, even if it was rezoned to R4, because it's pretty lengthy. I think it's up to even 9 months. Again, I may be speaking a little out of turn if Mr. Steiner might want to talk to that, but I think it's up to 9 months they're allowed to be relocating. So I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about that?
As far as they need to receive notice once the plan is approved or there's known that there's going to be a change in use, which would be after, all the development discussions with the city and you would get to the point where you were ready to permit it, they would then have, at some point, they'd have to be notified to move under the state statute. So the question that you were asking about, would it still be allowed under the rezone? I don't know that based on your city code either. If the rezone happened, if we could continue with the mobile home use until we were ready to do some redevelopment, that's a good question, because we would want to continue the mobile home use until we were, close to the ready to start building whatever went there. So that is a good question that we would want answered as well, and we could look into it more. But the state statute does govern how much notice they get once it's known when the change of use is going to happen. It's not triggered by rezone as far as the state statute. It's triggered when we, as I'm the attorney for the landlord, so that's why I'm here. It's triggered when we decide that we're going to change the use. They do have a period of time under state statute before they're required to move. Or in other words, we're required to give them sufficient notification based on state statute.
But that can be discussed the evening that we have the rezone hearing, to whether that'll be taken care of and how long that will apply.
Well, I still wanted to know tonight.
It would be nice to know tonight, but as far as being able to approve for the hearing, for his rezone request, I think that could even be addressed then, and we would still have sufficient time to either approve that or decline.
My reason for asking was just, if it's in violation, then we're kind of jumping the gun. If it's not a big deal, we can go ahead and do it and everything else. And if it does take as long as Mr. Eggett says it will, then that probably will be a non-factor also. But
I think it's a fair question, Commissioner Jones. I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence now. I mean, I know it may delay the applicants, but it may be worth giving 2 weeks to get the answers to that, because I don't normally do this. I'm normally good about, keeping timelines and stuff, but I get what you're saying. I don't want a bunch of mobile homes that are now in violation of a rezone to R4 either. I hadn't even thought about that until you just said that and asked that question. So, that does give me a little bit of pause to get a better feel, and maybe even talk to our city attorney about that scenario. And as it is, as I'm talking, I'm trying to look at the code itself and answer in time during the meeting to give you what you maybe want to know, and it may be worth talking to our city attorney about how that sits, because you're right. If an R4 multifamily is on top of a bunch of trailers, are now the trailers in violation of that zoning? I don't know what the process would look like, though, if you're trying to redevelop a site. Typically, we do rezone and then you do a site plan, so it's kind of a curious scenario. I'm not quite sure I have the answer right at the moment.
Hey, Mike, I remember that the piece of property up on Ritter Drive, the original rezone up there, wouldn't go into effect until they actually broke ground on the property. Maybe, we do something like that with this as well. Approve if the.
This happens every day in development where zoning is changed, whether it triggers at the point of like a a building permit, or whether it's the current use is grandfathered in, but it happens every place you do a rezone, because if you have vacant land and it gets rezoned to something more dense, from farmland to high density, it's still allowed as farmland. But it happens, for example, if you're going from single family homes to multifamily or to retail, it changes all over the state and all over the country. It happens, and it flows smoothly. So the current use will be grandfathered for a certain at least a period of time.
Okay, I just kind of wanted to get a feel for it, so that by our next planning commission meeting, if we have the public hearing, if that gets set tonight and we have it in 2 weeks, then that'll be kind of answered at that time too, and we can move forward from that point, rather than to have to stop there and have to wait till we know for sure. I mean, that's 2 weeks to come up with the answer, and I'm sure that's plenty enough time.
And I certainly could explore it with Steve and even invite him to attend the meeting, just to weigh in on that if it were warranted as well, where he is the attorney. Let him, I could get a feel for what he thinks, and I could talk to city administrator. I mean, what Mr. Steiner is right. In some aspects, if you can't do that, then it would almost force and hold properties without being changes of uses or being redeveloped. And so grandfathering an existing use, even though it doesn't comply with the new zoning, in order to allow for development to happen, that does make some sense, that logic.
Like a legal non-conforming use.
Yeah. You're almost,
I've seen where they might put a time limit on that, so it's not just indefinite out into the future that it's changed, but that's kind of the term, that it's a legal non-conforming use.
That's true. We would be creating legal non-conformance. So I do feel comfortable, at least with that argumentation there. I do. He's right in that aspect. I do agree with that. And
our intent, because we don't know exactly what, or I should say, I say we, my client doesn't know yet exactly the time frame or what will happen on the property. This is the initial work towards that. Because for the time being, they're managing it as a mobile home park, and they would comply fully with state law and everything, because the state Mobile Home Residency Act gives those mobile home residents rights at a state level for timing, and it restricts what landlords can do from protecting the residents.
Hey, this is Commissioner. I have a question for you. Do they own the mobile home, or are they renting it from your client?
So the mobile homes are mostly owned by the people living in the mobile homes or someone else who they're renting them from. My client does not typically own the mobile homes. There are a few that they have become the owner of because of defaults and people abandoning them. Typically in that park, I think they usually remove the old mobile homes because they're in such bad shape. If the person abandons them, I don't think they've kept any and re-rented them. I think they've allowed, if they've taken possession or ownership, they've removed the old mobile home and then let somebody come in with a newer one. But typically they are not in the business of owning the mobile homes to rent. My client. The residents typically own the mobile homes.
Several years ago, I know that people down there in the trailer court were told they were to be moving. Now, I can't remember, it's been about 2 years ago. Do we have new owners of the property? Is that what's happening?
Yes. There's that was per the old owners, Commissioner Knight. That's correct. The old owners had once sent out notification that might be happening, but the new owners have not. So yeah, that's different.
I might be speaking out of turn. Tell me if I'm right or wrong. I think we got to be careful. Ought to be extra careful, because we don't want the residents in the trailer park to suddenly think they're being kicked out when we hit the front page of the news.
So we are required to also give them notice before the meetings. They receive notice of this meeting and of the public meeting they'll receive, so that they have the ability to comment But also, the property manager is in contact with them, and those rights they have under the state statute are, again, by statute, included in their lease document. So they're aware of all the terms that they have and the rights they have, because that's required by the state now, that you put all their statutory rights in the lease, and that it's also posted at the park. And so this owner is in compliance with that. And so the residents have a good chance to understand their rights and to realize they can't be kicked out without the proper time frame. In fact, the notice that they'll receive regarding the zoning will include another notification of the number of months that are required to be given before they would have to leave. Now, that doesn't guarantee that everyone will understand it, but again, the property manager talks to the residents as much as they want to call in. So, and try to help everyone understand their rights.
Thank you. Okay, action item B, consideration to set public hearing for proposed rezone request from mobile home park recreational vehicle park RMH1 zoning to multiple family residential R4 zoning for properties located at approximately 671 West, 4400 South, Riverdale, Utah 84405, as requested by H&H 39th Street LLC. Mr. Reggett?
Thank you. The comments are pretty much all the same as last time. I only wanted to add one more thing to it that I didn't share on the last item, and maybe it would have been appropriate then, but I think it's still helpful now. I did tell you all that I would research the general plan language for this kind of a request. The general plan land use master plan has it listed as a residential medium density use for this project area. And so I looked up in our general plan that term medium density to try to find as many instances of it that I could. And this is what our general plan has under the land use district definitions in table M. The designation of MDR, medium density residential, is owner occupied attached or small lot housing, usually in a planned unit type of development with at least one enclosed parking space. Second car and guest parking may be open or under a carport. And then under a section called Survey of Residential Zoning and the Zoning for Multifamily Housing, it says the purpose of the medium density residential zone are in parentheses R2 with rental unit and R3 in parentheses is to identify and encourage the development of a variety of medium housing density types and styles, including single family dwellings, 2-family dwellings, and 4-family dwellings. There are 2 areas of the city that are zoned R-4, which is a medium high density zone. One area is occupied by apartments, and the other area has a number of single-family dwellings currently existing on the property with additional undeveloped vacant property making up the area. The R3 zoned areas are considered a medium density. There are currently 4 areas of the city that are zoned R3. 3 of those areas contain 4-plex dwelling units, and one of these areas would accommodate a 4-plex structure. And then under Area 7, wherein this property currently sits, there's a statement in there, which is actually kind of interesting in light of the request. Says there is also a section of residential medium density in the northeast of this area, along 4400 South and near 700 West, which has potential to be converted to a planned commercial use in the future. A future transition in housing options on the modular home park in this area at approximately 650 West, 4400 South may also make sense in order to accommodate potential alternative multi-housing options at the modular home park location. So that's what our general plan says about this kind of area and the designation of medium density residential zone. It's for your information. If you'd like to know where that's at, feel free to send me an email, and then I can guide you to where that is if you want to read more of the context in any of those areas. But along with what I previously described in the application, this is just an opportunity for the Planning Commission to then consider the comments we've just discussed, consider the information that's been provided, and then determine if this is the right time based on the information in the application, if it's been submitted correctly and completely, to schedule a public hearing. And as I noted in the work session, the next available date would be the 23rd of March for a 6:30 meeting, if that was something the Planning Commission might want to do. So with that, I would defer to planning commissioners if you have any questions or take action as you desire. Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion that we set the public hearing for March 23rd on the rezone request from RMH-1 zoning to R4 zoning for properties located at approximately 671 West, 4400 South, requested by H&H LLC.
I'll second
I'll
that.
second it.
Shaylee, will you poll the commissioners, please?
Commissioner Jones,
Aye.
Commissioner Nye,
Aye.
Commissioner Spires,
Aye.
Commissioner DeMar,
Aye.
Commissioner Herman,
Aye.
and Commissioner Anderson.
Aye.
Okay, great job. Passes unanimously. So we'll have a public hearing on the 23rd.
Is that at this same time as this meeting? Would it be at 6 or 7 or
6:30.
6:30?
But we would have a brief work session before, but the actual public hearing that the public would attend is at 6:30.
Okay.
Any discretionary items from anybody?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Okay. All in favor? Okay. Great job, you guys. Hopefully we'll be sitting in person soon.
See you all. You have a great night.
You guys too.
Thank you.
Hey, Mike,
Yep.
I just emailed Amy. We are going to